In the beginning, there was nothing but the void. The earth was empty, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Yet, from this abyss, the Creator spoke, and with his words, he brought forth light and life. God, with infinite power, shaped the world. The mountains rose, the seas were divided, and every living thing, plants, animals, and even the heavens themselves, were formed in divine order. Everything was good, but there was one thing that was not yet finished. In the midst of the creation, God decided to make something unique, something to share in the beauty of his work, someone to experience and enjoy the world with him. And so, he fashioned man, Adam, from the dust of the earth, breathing life into his nostrils. From that breath, Adam became a living soul, filled with purpose. God placed Adam in the beautiful Garden of Eden, a paradise like no other, where rivers flowed with fresh water, where trees bore fruit in abundance, and where the air was always warm and fragrant. It was here that Adam was called to cultivate and keep the garden, to name the animals, and live in harmony with them. Yet, God noticed that Adam was alone, and he knew that this was not good. From Adam's side, God created Eve, the first woman, a partner to walk beside him in the fullness of creation. Together, Adam and Eve were united, not just as man and woman, but as the first family, designed to experience life, love, and fulfillment in a world that was perfect and untouched by sin. In this paradise, everything was perfect. God was with them. They had everything they could possibly need, and there was no fear, no pain, no shame. It was the golden age, where humanity knew no separation from their Creator. But there was one command that God had given them, a simple, clear instruction. You may eat freely from every tree in the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. It was a command not meant to hinder them, but to protect them. For in the freedom of the garden, there was still a choice, a chance to live in trust, in obedience, and in communion with God. Though Adam and Eve had every other tree to enjoy, one tree stood alone. Its fruit was pleasing to the eye, tempting in its beauty. But God's command made it clear. To eat from it would mean death, a separation from the life God had given. And so life went on, peaceful and serene. But as with all things, there was a turning point, a day when temptation would enter the garden and everything would change. It began with a quiet whisper. A serpent slithered into the garden, its sleek body gliding smoothly over the ground. This serpent was no ordinary creature, but one possessed with cunning and craftiness. The Bible tells us that this serpent was the devil, an ancient enemy of God, bent on sowing seeds of doubt and destruction. One day, as Eve wandered near the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she encountered the serpent. Its eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto hers. Its voice was smooth, inviting, almost innocent. Did God really say you cannot eat from every tree in the garden? The serpent asked, a hint of mockery in its tone. Eve paused. The serpent's question was not just a simple inquiry. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. She knew the truth, but the serpent's words caused a ripple of doubt in her heart. We may eat the fruit of all the trees in the garden, she replied, except for the tree in the middle of the garden. God said that if we eat from it or even touch it, we will die. But the serpent's voice grew more persuasive. You will not surely die, it hissed, its words sweet and deceptive. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Eve's heart began to race. The serpent's words were like a seed planted in the soil of her mind. God had said that death would come if she ate the fruit. But now, the serpent was telling her something different, something enticing, something that spoke of wisdom, of knowledge, of the possibility of being like God. She looked at the fruit. It was beautiful. Its skin was smooth, and its color radiant. It promised more than just sustenance. It promised wisdom, the ability to know and understand things that were beyond her reach. The temptation was overwhelming. The pull of the fruit was too strong. She reached out, her fingers brushing against its cool skin, And in that moment, something deep within her stirred. She took the fruit in her hand and, without a second thought, she bit into it. The taste was not what she expected. It wasn't a sensation of joy or fulfillment. It was something far more complex. As the sweetness of the fruit filled her mouth, something else filled her heart. A sudden awareness, a deep, unsettling knowledge. She realized she was naked, exposed in a way she had never known before. And with that realization came shame. Her innocence was gone. But it wasn't just the knowledge of her nakedness. No, it was more. She realized in that moment that she had disobeyed God. She had chosen to act outside His will, to trust her own judgment above His. In a panic, she ran to Adam, her heart heavy with guilt. She found him in the garden, still unaware of the change that had just taken place. She held out the fruit to him, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Here, Adam, I ate, and now I see. You must eat too." Adam, standing before Eve, had a choice. He could stand firm, choosing obedience to God, trusting that God's command was good. Or, like Eve, he could choose to follow the path of self-interest to share in her fate. And in that moment, Adam, too, succumbed. He took the fruit and he ate. The moment Adam ate, everything changed. The world, once perfect, was now broken. The air seemed heavier. The ground felt different beneath their feet. A shadow passed over them, and for the first time, they experienced fear. The fruit had not made them like God. It had made them aware of their sin. They were ashamed, not just of their nakedness, but of the distance they had placed between themselves and their Creator. They rushed to cover themselves, sewing fig leaves together in a desperate attempt to hide from the truth of their actions. And then they heard it, the sound of footsteps in the garden, the unmistakable sound of God walking in the cool of the day. In the past, this sound had filled their hearts with joy, but now it filled them with terror. "Where are you?" God called out, His voice filled with love, but also with sorrow. He knew exactly where they were. He knew what they had done, but He called to them anyway, because He wanted them to come, to face the truth, to see their own hearts. Adam's voice trembled as he spoke, his words heavy with guilt. "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid. Who told you that you were naked?" God asked. "Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" The weight of God's question pierced Adam's heart. He knew the truth, but instead of owning his actions, he blamed Eve. "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." Eve, standing before God, could feel the weight of her own shame. She, too, had disobeyed. She, too, had tasted the fruit, and now she, too, must face the consequences. "What is this you have done?" God asked Eve. Eve looked down, unable to meet God's gaze. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." And so, in that moment, God spoke the words that would forever change the course of human history. He pronounced judgment on the serpent, on Eve, and on Adam. But even in the midst of this judgment, He spoke words of hope. To the serpent He said, "Because you have done this, you are cursed above all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life." To Eve He said, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." And to Adam He said, "Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return." And then, the greatest tragedy of all, Adam and Eve were driven out of Eden. The gates to the garden were closed, and an angel with a flaming sword was placed at the entrance to guard the way to the tree of life. As they walked away from a garden, the world they had once known was no more. The beauty of the garden, the purity of their innocence, the closeness of their relationship with God, all were lost. And as they faced the harsh realities of the world, they carried with them the knowledge of good and evil. The world would never be the same again. But even as they left Eden, God did not leave them without hope. Though they had chosen to walk away from His perfect plan, He promised that one day a Redeemer would come, a seed of the woman who would crush the head of the serpent, who would undo what had been done. Though Adam and Eve walked out of Eden, they did not walk without a promise that redemption would one day come, and that the brokenness of the world would one day be restored.